Found a woman's hair clip that isn't mine in my boyfriend's room, and his silence screams more than any explanation could. I've been dating Dave for 2 years now. He's 31, I'm 30, and lately, I can't shake this gnawing feeling in my gut. It all started the other morning. I found a hair clip, one of those chunky claw ones, clipped to his dresser. It practically screamed at me with its alien presence. It wasn't mine. Not remotely. My hair is blonde in an undecided mix between straight and wavy, and this clip had dark, coarse strands caught in it. On top of that, there was residue from some cream gel or whatever, something I've never used. I stared at it, racking my brain. Maybe it belonged to a friend of his? Maybe Emily, a friend's girlfriend who was at our place months ago? I even said as much and offered to text her to check. But that suggestion was met by a heavy silence. Desperation and anger crept into my voice. "Whose is this?" I asked. He glared at me and spat out an uncertain, "Yours?" Like I just accused him of a felony. My insistence grew. That made no sense. He went quiet, offered nothing. Not even a theory. Just, "I don't know, Alexis." As if that would settle it. It did the opposite. I needed space. This felt wrong, and the vibe was as shady as street corner dealings in the dark. I left, thinking surely he'd call or message or offer something, anything. Instead, total radio silence. The hours ticked by then days. I called him when I got stranded and needed a ride, but he refused. Not even pretending to care. He sounded angry, like my questions were an offense rather than his lack of answers. He doubled down with some ugly words. "You'll regret this. Get the F out and shut the F up, I didn't do anything wrong." After I pressed him and said I was not letting this go, his only crumb of a defense, via text, was to say it's not in his character, he doesn't have the time, energy, or even the desire to do something like that. But I've seen this play before. This isn't a new episode, it's a rerun. October, barely 3 months ago, random panties surface in the laundry. No explanation, no story, just silence and denial. Back then, I let it go after a tense session with my therapist, almost convincing myself it was a fluke. But it doesn't feel like a fluke when it happens again, especially with even less effort on his part to clear things up. Now I'm stuck, thrown by the feeling that if he was innocent, he'd be fighting to resolve this, to explain, to do more than just stonewall me until I inevitably break up with him or sweep it under the rug. So now I'm left with a bunch of questions running wild in my mind. What is this hair clip doing on his dresser if it's not mine, not Emily's, not anyone who's been here? Why does he want me to just disappear instead of clearing things up? I keep wondering if I'm being unfair for needing space and demanding answers, or if I'm actually giving him exactly what he wants, an easy exit. He did send me one last text, swearing up and down that he never cheated, never would, that he doesn't have the energy for it and would never do that to me. He detailed how he spends all his time gaming, that the only plausible time frame for cheating was yesterday while I was gone, and that when I saw him then, he looked like, in his words, greasy, unshowered, and not exactly in the state where I'd hang out with someone. He pleaded that he wouldn't try to sneak anything past me, said I'm too intelligent, too observant, too intuitively sharp, and that his guilty conscience would never allow him to lie. But none of his words can fill in the blank spaces he's left behind, and I can't help but feel like I'm supposed to just drop it and move on. I don't know what's worse, trusting him blindly again, or accepting that maybe he wants this chapter to end, hair clip and all. He said he was sorry for blowing up on me, said his anger isn't really about me at all, that it's rooted in old trauma. He started telling me about 7th grade, how his class bullied him for something he never did. How it happened all over again in 9th grade, this time the whole school piling on because of a rumor. Then it followed him to his job. When a nurse lied about one of his patients, he ended up being bullied in that environment, too. He explained his anger is the same guttural response he's had all these years, the feeling of being punished for something he didn't do. He looked me in the eye and admitted he can't prove he didn't cheat. Honestly, I felt something harden in me at that. But he told me to check his gaming activity from that day. It would show he was online for nearly 16 hours straight. He offered up his friends as alibis, told me I could ask any of them to vouch for him. He said if anything had happened, I'd know, I'd smell it in the sheets. The memory of last October came rushing back. Back then, he hadn't changed the sheets either. I told him so. He snapped, "We weren't dating," as if that made it different. I told him, "My point is, you're capable." He insisted, "It's different now. And there's the matter of the cameras." Of course, the cameras were down conveniently during the window when I was gone, and both the panties and the hair clip appeared. He said he'd replaced the Wi-Fi modem because he was setting up the sound bar, and claimed it disconnected the security system without him realizing. I didn't buy it. He's incredibly smart, incredibly strategic. He could have easily set it up ahead of time. He insisted it was just poor timing, reminded me that he'd told me to look at the cameras myself. I told him point blank, he was asking me to let go of all logic and just believe him, even though so many things didn't add up past situationship behavior, stories that shift with the wind, and too many coincidences for me to ignore. You're asking me to close my eyes and pretend I didn't find what I found, I said. At least he told me he had reached out to his old counselor. I had asked him earlier in the conversation to do precisely that. His anger response is not normal, and I can't just overlook it, no matter how many apologies I get. I told him I still need more time. I can't just drop the hair clip in the panties and move on. Instinct matters, and honestly, I'm not about to silence mine. I watch crime shows for fun. I need evidence, hard facts, before I can believe someone's innocent when logic and context are screaming otherwise. I'm not trying to punish him by having him move out, I truly am not. But I'm not going to ignore my gut, either. Update 2. He left for the gym. I stayed behind and logged into the router. I don't know what I expected, an empty screen, maybe, something that would make me feel silly and paranoid. Instead, right there in the device history, in idiot blue font, Emily's iPhone. Connected for 49 minutes on the exact morning the hair clip showed up. My hands went cold. The modem he just replaced kept the logs. Of course it did. It tracked first scene, last scene, and even the bounce when she walked out of range. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Then I went across the hall and knocked on Ms. Patel's door because her Ring camera is pointed at the shared landing. She tilted her head when she saw me, then her face softened, and she pulled the footage up without me having to explain why. And there she was, long dark hair, big purple tote, familiar navy sweatshirt I recognize from game nights. The timestamp lands with a thud in my chest. She turns to lock my door behind her like she's been doing it for years, and when she shifts the tote from one arm to the other, her sleeve rides up and I can see it plain as a billboard, the little paper plane tattoo on her wrist. I didn't even say thank you. I just walked back to my apartment and texted him the screenshot of the router and the sill from Ms. Patel's video. No preamble. No ISA. Just sent them and watched the 3 gray dots pulse and disappear, like a heartbeat that can't decide whether to live or die. He finally wrote back, she came by to grab the extra controller for a friend. That's it. As if that explains a hair clip with someone else's hair sitting in our bedroom. I called him. He picked up, then immediately went into that tight, clipped voice he uses when he thinks he's steering the ship. Lex, you're not listening. I didn't do anything. I was gaming. Ask the guys. I put him on speaker and called one of the guys from his Discord. He picked up, karate and honest. Yeah, man was on most of the day, but he dipped for like an hour and muted. We thought he crashed. The silence after that said everything. He came home in this frantic, performative rush, sweat still wet on his collarbone, gym bag thudding against the door, talking fast before I could even open my mouth. Why would I risk this? Why would I do it here? Why would I? I held up the still frame of Emily on my phone like a mirror. His face did that thing where it drains from the top down. He stuttered something about her crying about her boyfriend, needing a place to talk, about boundaries, about how nothing happened. Nothing happened left his mouth so quickly it felt rehearsed. I asked why the cameras were down, again. He babbled through a tangle about the modem and the sound bar and timing and you can check everything, like I hadn't literally just done that. I texted Emily. It felt like picking up a live wire. She read it right away. For a full minute I watched the dots. Then, I'm sorry you're finding out like this. I hadn't asked a question. She kept going. She said she and Dave just needed to clear the air, that it wasn't supposed to become a thing, that nothing happened on your bed. I didn't ask about the bed. She wrote that twice. I think my heart actually stopped for a beat. I called her. She answered. Her voice was small, like she was speaking from inside a closet. She said she and her boyfriend were fighting and Dave has always been a safe place and it was one time, I swear. One time in October, too. I asked. She went quiet. There was a long inhale. She said, that wasn't me. But she said it like someone who'd already spent the truth and was now paying with lint. He tried to herd me into forgiveness in the kitchen. He made a show of tidying, of making tea, of saving face in our own home. He wanted to talk about trauma. He wanted to cry against my shoulder. He wanted me to carry it away for him like I always do. The words he kept leaning on sounded like pillows thrown onto a fire. Soft, youthless. The only thing that mattered was that she wasn't here. In our space. Connecting to our Wi-Fi, like it belonged to her. I told him I wanted him to pack a bag and stay with a friend while we figured out logistics. He went from pleading to rage like someone flipped a light. The swear words were familiar, The cadence was familiar, the way he threw his hands in the air and laughed like I was hysterical was familiar. He called me dramatic. I asked him to stop packing and go. He didn't. He paced. He said if I kick him out, I'm ending it. I told him I'm not kicking him out. I'm asking him to leave because he invited someone else in. He finally grabbed a duffel and went, slamming the door hard enough to make the frames on the wall tremble. I put the hair clip into a Ziploc bag because it felt right to treat it like evidence even if the verdict was already in. I changed the Wi-Fi name and password to something ugly and petty and private. I texted our landlord. I asked about rekeying. I booked it. The tap of my own fingers on the screen felt decisive in a way I haven't felt in months. MS. Patel slid a printout of the ring stills under my door later like a neighborly casserole. I stared at them until my vision blurred and then I laughed, this strange, dry laugh that came from somewhere new. Not happy. Not unhinged. Just finished. He sent one more text tonight, a last-ditch mix of love bombing and alibi, screenshots of game hours, a blurry photo of a controller, some excuse about Emily's boyfriend, needing it for a tournament. He ended with, please don't do something we can't come back from. I thought about the router page. I thought about the door I watched her lock behind herself like it was her right. I thought about all the ways he needed me to ignore the obvious. Update 3. The locksmith came with a jangly belt and a voice like gravel in a bucket. He didn't make small talk, just knelt by the deadbolt and made our door new. MS. Patel hovered in the hall with a mug I didn't drink. When he was done, he wiped his hands and said, almost offhand, funny, your boyfriend already had us cut an extra set back in November. Said it was for a cleaner. The word landed in my chest with the weight of a sack of flour. Extra set. Cleaner. I signed the receipt with a pen that skated. He texted twice while the man was still twisting the screws, first a long paragraph about misunderstandings, then a picture of that extra controller on a stranger's coffee table. There was a coaster under it, like evidence of good manners. I started collecting his things into piles that made sense to me: hoodies with hoodies, chargers with chargers, the sea of black socks that seemed to clone themselves in the dryer. I put the Ziploc with a hair clip on top of one box like a label. My hands were steady. Inside, everything went a house fire. The Find My alert hit when I was elbow deep in the hall closet. AirTag found moving with you. The words blinked up at me like a dare. I thought at first it was a glitch, then I hit play sound and froze. From somewhere close, a tiny digital chirp answered, skittish as a bird in a duct. I followed it like a kid following a penny whistle. Not my work tote. Not my coat. Louder by the entry bench. The chirp turned into a nervous little metronome when I lifted my gym bag. It was sewn into the lining, the fabric top stitched closed with thread that didn't match. I cut it out with kitchen scissors and held an off-white puck in my palm. The back was scuffed. When I pressed it to my phone, it blinked serial numbers and a bland, helpful link about personal safety. No lost message. No contact info. Just a device named Umbrella. Funny. I took pictures from every angle. I took a video of the sound. I texted him a photo of the puck on my cutting board next to a 1/4 scale because my brain loves scale. He wrote back, fast, I don't own an AirTag. Could be from a package. Like we order boxes of cats that get chirpy when they're bored. When would I have stitched it into my bag? I sent. He pivoted to wounded. He wrote that I'm paranoid. He wrote that he hopes I find peace. I put the AirTag in the microwave for a minute with it unplugged, door shut like a coffin, because someone on TV did that once and the symbolism was neat. It stopped chirping. I disabled it the normal way after because this is real life and microwaves don't fix people. MS. Patel knocked like a sparrow. She'd already pulled the footage without asking because apparently our hallway now has a beat. Shoo, nights ago, 1:23 am. M. My car and frame, a shape bending by the passenger side wheel. Hoodie up. The timestamp is mean. He's taller than our mailman and shorter than the ups guy. He moves like I know him. I mouthed thank you and didn't trust my voice. I called a security company because the camera story had been itching under my skin. The woman on the line sounded like morning shift coffee. She told me my system had been disarmed from the app at 9:08 am. That day. Not Wi-Fi failure. Not a modem's bad mood. User initiated disarm, she read. She offered to email me the log. I watched my inbox populate with his full name next to a neat line of times like the minutes on a mugshot. Then the unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Alexis? A man's voice, younger than I expected, caught on my name like Velcro. He introduced himself as Emily's boyfriend and used his last name too, like he wanted something official on the record. He said he found my message on her iPad, that he hadn't meant to read it, that of course he did. He stumbled through a breath, then said, quietly, that he had screens. They use Instagram Vanish, he said, almost apologetically. I screen recorded it with my old phone. I stared at a knot in my floor until it became a continent. He sent them. 10 seconds of the two of them arranging me like an obstacle course. She's gone 10-12 from his bubble. Cameras off, from his bubble. A heart from hers. A paper plane emoji made my scalp prickle. I asked him if he knew about October. He made a sound I can't categorize. He said he'd found a Lyft receipt to my address on a Tuesday in October at 10:41 p.m. He said he didn't sleep for 2 days back then. He said he thought he was crazy. He said her paper plane is for take me anywhere. I sat on my cold kitchen tile with my back against a cabinet and a stranger in my ear and felt less alone than I have in months. We didn't make a plan. We didn't say much. We just let the shared shape of it sit between us and breathe. He tried to come back for more clothes an hour later. The new key caught and turned and the door didn't move for him and he hated that. He rattled the handle. He thumped once with his palm like he could knock the lock into reason. He texted, "Open the door or I'm calling the cops." I texted back, "Schedule a time." He called. I didn't answer. MS. A Tell's peephole caught him checking the jam like the wood might tell on me. He left with a theatrical exhale I could feel through the wall. I put his boxes by the entry like a display in a sad museum. Controller on top of one. Hair clip on top of another. I labeled one box Jim and the tape bubble like it wanted to peel back its own truth. He sent an apology voice memo at 11:32 p.m. More breath than words, the kind you send to get credit for the sending. I didn't listen to the whole thing. His voice felt like an old bruise being pressed. Emily texted me again around midnight. "I'm sorry" without punctuation. I stared at the paper plane on her wrist in the still and then at the paper plane in the Vanish chat and then at the paper plane emoji in my own phone and suddenly it was all the same shape. I typed and deleted until my thumbs were stiff, then I sent, "You locked my door." She responded with a voice note I didn't open. I am done letting their sounds live in my head. I emailed myself a folder called Facts in all caps because petness and organization can be siblings. Router logs. Alarm logs. Ring stills. Vanish video. Lyft receipt screenshot. AirTag serial number in a text file. The photo of the extra controller that was actually our kitchen table, our coaster in the corner like he'd staged it and forgot our wood grain is unique. The pen mark on the right-hand side of the placemat is mine. Of course it is. I slept on the couch with the lamp on and felt my body spool down from red alert to yellow. When I woke up, the apartment smelled like nothing and it felt like mine. I made coffee and it tasted like coffee. I held a Ziploc with a hair clip and I didn't feel sick, I felt like a scientist bagging a specimen. There was a quiet I recognized in my bones. The kind that isn't waiting for footsteps or apologies or explanations. The kind that's just itself. Update 4. He showed up with 2 officers like he was ordering curbside pickup on a life. One of them had a mustache that looked like a separate being, the other wore his pen crooked in his vest and called me ma'am in a way that didn't make me feel 80. "Civil standby," they said, calm as dishwater. I opened the door to exactly the width of the chain and then unhooked it because theater isn't my thing anymore. His eyes went straight to the boxes like magnets know where home is. He couldn't help himself, he started narrating the weather of his feelings, but I only spoke to the officers. He can't take what's his from these piles. 30 minutes. One of them clicked his pen like a metronome and nodded. MS. Patel materialized in the hall with a lawn chair I swear I've never seen before and a crossword, the picture of an unbothered sentinel. He tried to float a hoodie of mine into his duffel and one officer cleared his throat in a way that moved the air. He reached for the diffuser from my nightstand. "Gift," he said. "Receipt in my email." "No," I said. He palmed the Ziploc with the hair clip like it was a lit match and dropped it again. Micro flinch. A whole history packed into a twitch of his jaw. He didn't look at the AirTag on the counter, all, and somehow that was the loudest part. He left hugging his duffel to his chest like a kid leaving camp. At the last second he bent, slid something under the welcome mat, with a sleight of hand he must have learned from YouTube. After the door shut, I lifted the corner with 2 fingers. A key on a ring with a white plastic tag. "Clean," someone had written in blue Sharpie, that bled like a bad secret. I put it in a Ziploc and labeled it with a post-it. It felt like naming a star. I took the AirTag and the disarm logs and MS. Attell stills to the precinct. The lobby smelled like floor cleaner and coffee, and the officer at the front desk had reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose with his knuckle. I said tracking device and his eyebrows went somewhere north. He took down my story in block letters, like he was carding it. He scanned the umbrella puck and read me a case number with a voice that could anchor ships. "We can't tell you who registered it without a warrant," he said, careful, not unkind. "But you did good documenting. If he shows up again, call. If he contacts you, save it. Consider an order." Consider felt ridiculous. I asked for the form. The paper was thin like hotel napkins and somehow heavier than anything I was holding. I drove straight to a shop with a neon sign that had never been fully lit in the 10 years I've lived here. The mechanic had 4 arms like old rope and a wedding ring that had turned his finger pale underneath. "Track her?" he said, as if this is Tuesday now. He put my car up and the world became ceiling and steel. He ran his hand along the undercarriage like he was reading Braille. "Ha," he said, soft. Then louder, "This ain't yours." He levered out a little black box, magnet-backed, no brand, the size of an Altoids 10 that forgot how to be made. He cracked it open on the workbench with a flathead, and there it was, a SIM card lounging in its plastic throne, a battery fat as a thumb. He didn't touch the card. Neither did I. He took pictures on my phone with his hands in the frame so there would be scale. When he handed the box to me, I could feel the cold of it through the plastic bag, like a fish I hadn't asked for. Back to the precinct. Same officer, new position, further glasses. He took the box like it could bite. "We'll book it," he said, and his pen made a sound like sand when it moved. He stapled my incident number to a new sheet and gave me a copy that felt like a ticket out of something. "Temporary orders ex parte. Judge will see it fast," he said. The way he said fast was a hand on my back. I printed the screenshots in the copy shop across the street because they make things real with that warm, damp paper feeling. Alarm logs. Router page. Vanish video paused on a hard. Lift receipt. The 123 mAh. Hem. Frame where the hood hides everything except posture. I slid them into a manila folder that bulged like a wallet in a bad movie and wrote my own name on the tab so the universe knew who it belonged to. He must have felt the filing from across town because my phone doubled over with messages while I was still under the fluorescence. First the paragraph that thinks it's a parachute. Then, "Can we talk like adults?" Then, "If you keep lying to authorities, I'll have to protect myself." Protect himself. I stood under the hum of the lights and let that sentence disintegrate into its smallest atoms. I forwarded everything to the case email the officer had given me. The clerk at the counter had a tiny gold airplane stud in her ear and I almost laughed at the ugliness of symmetry. Emily's boyfriend texted while I was halfway through a bland turkey sandwich I didn't taste. Coffee? One word, clean. We met at a place with chipped mugs and a teenager behind the counter who called everyone boss regardless of gender. He slid into the booth across from me like he was trying not to splash. He had the look of someone who has slept in his clothes and didn't make a fuss about it. He set his phone on the table and didn't make a show of turning it face down. He had a folder too. What a club. He didn't push it at me. He just said, "I told her to go." Not triumphant, not cruel. Just true. He thumbed open a video and hit play. Their Vanish chat, recorded with the camera pointed at a screen like it was 2009. His kitchen table in the background of a selfie I recognized only because of the ring of water my own glass had left there 4 nights ago. He'd taken the controller photo in the rush and forgot was a fingerprint. Different timestamp, my lamp in the left-hand corner, light pooled where it shouldn't be. He scrolled. A shot of my hallway rug. Her shoes, those white sneakers with that scuff on the heel lined up like they live here. She told me she used the key because she was scared you might walk in, he said, and then looked like the sentence hurt coming out. What key? I asked, knowing. He took a breath that tried to be steady. A copy. Label said C. He spread his hands like he was apologizing for a weather system. I showed him the bag with clean written on it and we both just exhaled at the same time. If our wind could have made a sound together, it would have been a door closing. The order went through faster than I thought paper could move. The clerk stamped the top with a thud that felt ceremonial. The language was arid and perfect. No contact. No coming within a distance that the human mind can't easily imagine. Service would be attempted. I walked home with it in my tote like a relic and slid a chair under the doorknob because every movie I've ever seen told me to. I took the draft stopper and wedged it tight so there would be no more notes under the mat, benign or otherwise. The apartment hummed its little hum. The fax folder on my desktop pulsed with its stupid blue icon and I added the order, like a crown on a stacked cake. He tried me from a different number around 6. Unknown. I let it ring into voicemail and listened to it transcription only like it was a museum plaque. He said my name 8 times in 30 seconds. He said misunderstanding twice and manipulation 0. He said he never put anything on my car and my brain put the SIM card on a tiny chair and left. I forwarded it. I blocked it. A minute later, a delivery alert popped up for a bouquet addressed to me from him, and MS. Patel texted from the hall, want me to redirect. I wrote back, trash day is tomorrow. Later she knocked and handed me a photo of the bouquet like it was an endangered species, lilies blooming so white they looked like lies. I opened the drawer by the stove to toss a rubber band and a folded sheet of paper blinked up at me like it had been waiting. A cleaning service flyer. We don't get flyers, and our mailbox, our landlord hates anything that isn't rent. The number had a local area code, but when I called, a recorded voice told me the Google subscriber was unavailable. Of course he had given the locksmith a word and a number and a story like a costume. I stuck the flyer into the manila folder so it could be lonely with its own kind. I went out to the car after dark, just to sit behind the wheel because the shape of it felt like a room where I used to feel safe. I turned the key and didn't go anywhere. The mechanic had wiped his fingerprints off the bumper, but you could still see the smudge as if the light hit just right. I touched the spot and thought about the little black box in an evidence bag and, for the first time in days, I didn't feel haunted. It was just metal and paint. Just rubber meeting pavement. Just me, hands at 10 and 2, breathing like a person again. When I came back upstairs, there was a white envelope taped to my door slant that made my neck itch. Service confirmed, a scrawl across the top like lightning, the server's signature looking like a seismograph. I peeled it off and put it under a magnet shaped like a tomato because pettiness is still allowed, even next to legalese. My phone lit up with an email from the security company. We noticed a failed login attempt. The IP address was a string of numbers that meant nothing to me and everything. I changed the master password to a sentence, only I know, something my grandmother used to say about doors and thresholds, that sounds like a spell when you whisper it. I made dinner I could eat with 1 fork and 2 fingers. I turned the TV on low and let a sitcom talk to itself in the corner. I took the hair clip out of the Ziploc and set it next to the bag of evidence like a docile animal that used to bite. The paper plane tattoo in the still stared up from the printout and, for once, I didn't feel the air move around it. The apartment held steady. The chair under the knob held steady. MS. Patel's hallway light made a stripe under the door that looked like sunrise. Update 5. Court looks exactly like television until you're the one whispering your own name to a clerk with a stamp that could brand Cal. The benches smell like lemon oil and old pencils. A man with a kind of mustache that suggests traditions told me to sit in the second row. He was very serious about rows. Dave wore his good shirt and the face he's used since 9th grade when he gets caught without an alibi. I handed over the manila folder with facts on the tab and felt the paper heat under my fingers like a small animal. The judge's robe made a soft sound when she moved, a library kind of sound, and she was not interested in weather reports about anyone's feelings. She took in the router page like she was swallowing a pill dry. The alarm logs landed. The umbrella puck in a clear bag sighed when I set it down. When she read GP, asked device affixed to vehicle, she stopped, lifted her gaze, and the air in the room tidied itself. She signed, ain't sure and unsentimental, and spoke lengths and feet that made my bones loosen. Out in the hallway he tried to find my eyes with the urgency of someone at a lost and found. The bailiff's hand floated into the space between us like a low-hanging cloud and didn't have to do anything more. I walked home in that after-court quiet that makes you check your phone to see if the volume's on. The chair was still under the knob. The apartment made its little apartment sounds. 10 minutes later, a knock that did not belong to him because it had risen. A woman stood there with a caddy of spray bottles clicking against each other like teeth. Ponytail, polo with a logo that looked designed in a hurry. Weekly clean 4C, she said, like a question and an apology at once. My own name in her mouth, but not really, just the letter. She held up a crumpled work order with my address in blocky type and, underneath, in handwriting I didn't have to tilt my head to recognize, Tuesdays 10:30 a.m. He under mat. If cameras, text umbrella. The word sat there like it owned the room. She blinked at my silence. They said you might not be in, she offered, trying to be helpful and regular while holding a piece of paper like a match. I took a photo. I took another. I'm canceling, I said, and her relief was almost audible. He paid 2 up front, she said, awkward, like she didn't want me to think she was on his team. Hash. She left me the copy and her card and a look that had swum in these waters before. The soundbar app has lived on my phone like lint. I open it because every box in this house means something now. The device page loaded like it was nervous. Air devices scrolled up and stopped with a neat little list that made me nauseous and vindicated at the same time. iPhone, iPad, and then, blue as philosophy, Emily's iPhone. Last connected, the morning the clip showed up. Same window as the router. Same 40-something minutes, if you're willing to be a little poetic with the numbers. I took screenshots until my camera roll up like a confession. It occurred to me to look down, not just in the cabinet where the mods go, but under the outlet where we've always kept a spare charger for when people forget theirs. Except there was a second cube there now, a twing with a different face. It had a hef chargers don't have. No brand. The plastic was the wrong kind of white. I held it in my hand and felt the click of the prongs wobble like a loose tooth. When I pressed a paperclip into the pinhole that pretended to be nothing, the front popped open and a microSD card blinked back at me like an eye. My stomach did that elevator drop and then smoothed out into something frightfully calm. I set it on the cutting board next to the quarter again, because scale comforts me. I took photos. I slid the card into the adapter I didn't know I owned until now, and my laptop breathed it in, unbothered. Folders labeled by dates, generous in their organization. October. 2 Tuesdays. Last week. The thumbnails were small and mean. I clicked the most recent and our living room unspooled itself across my screen, fisheye wide. The door in frame. The rug with a wine stain I tell myself only I can see. 10-12 m. The metal tongue of the dead bull, collecting itself, slow and deliberate. The frame played a joke on my revs, arm first, race second, paper plane third. She stepped into my home like she was stepping into a predictable sentence. He followed 5 minutes later, already talking. He put his phone on the console table, screen face up, alarm app open like a dare. He touched the couch with a hand that pretended to be looking for a lint. The camera didn't care about our sheets, but it didn't have to. She bent to tie her shoe at 10:50 if when a man fished a claw clip out of her toad and parted her hair with that impatient little ray, call women no. The strands that fell were as dark as last week. She set the clip on the console without looking, like you always do, when a thing you own has a home here. When they left, she turned and locked the door with a muscle memory that is not muscle memory unless you've practiced. The footage ended itself with a click that felt like a 7th period bell. I unplugged the cube with the care you use to carry glass through a crowd. It felt indecent to keep watching. It felt equally indecent not to. I watched the October folder anyway. Different shirt on him, same posture. Different toad on her, same wrist. My spine could have been a ruler, the parts of me that like to fling themselves around strapped into a 5-point harness. I slid the card into a bag, the bag into another bag, wrote camera in tidy letters on a post-it because neatness steadies me. The charger's face stared up at me as if offended to be outed as anything other than helpful. Back to the precinct. Same counter, same officer, new little respect I wasn't interested in earning. He didn't hide the swear when the still frame with her wrist in it lit up his screen. That's illegal as hell, he said, reflexively. He logged the cube and the card into the evidence system, case number getting a new hyphen like we were naming a child after a relative. You did right bagging it, he said, and I didn't correct his tense. He asked if I wanted to be called when the techs finished pulling what they could. Yes, I said, and the word was adore. On the way home I stopped at the place that sells keys and kettle cords and hope. The man who sharpens skates there on weekends took one look at the clean tag in my bag and said, "Careful, we've seen those." He slid a dish of wrapped butterscotch toward me the way bartenders slide napkins. I left it there. Emily texted a question mark like it was a life preserver. It blew up blue and small and it did not make me reach for anything. Her boyfriend sent me a photo of a cardboard box on a sidewalk, top flaps yawning, caption she's at her sister's. It felt like a weather report without adjectives. I opened the security app and changed the password again to another sentence only I know. I set the motion alert for the entry to volume that will wake the dead. The sound bar pinged an update request and I told it to be quiet. The apartment has started to be kind to me in little ways. The zipper on my winter coat didn't jam. The spoon I wanted was the first one my hand found. I moved the couch 2 inches because I could. MS. Patel slid a note under my door with the delicacy of a surgeon. It said simply, "Court went well." And a doodle of a tiny gavel that made my entire chest soften. He tried me again through someone else's number and it came through as the emptiest thing I've ever received, a 1-cent Venmo with a heart in the memo. The order says that counts. I took a screenshot even though I didn't need to. I added it to fax and the folder got a new little weight to it, a coin in a fountain. I sent it to the case email. The out of office pinged back that they'd see it at 8 a.m. And I smiled at boundaries that hold. I set the claw clip on the counter for the first time without plastic between it and the world. It looked ordinary. It looked like something you'd buy in a drugstore aisle that smells like shampoo. It looked like a noun again, not a verdict. The camera cube sat beside it in its bag, ugly and unblinking. The order hung from the tomato magnet on the fridge like a recipe someone swears by. I made dinner that used every burner just to feel the apartment move around me. When the kettle whistled, it did it at exactly the right pitch. The door was only a door. The lock was only a lock. The quiet wasn't on duty, it was off, finally, and that is a different kind of sound altogether.